Okay, so I've just gone over how to put the Paris V5, sorry, revision 3, on my Recon V3. Everything's V3 now, my God. I've gone over that now, but the other thing I skipped over and I want to come back and look at is how we now use the Andromeda V3. Now, very important big tip to those of you out there who have never built anything like this before, who have never played with multi-rotors, who have never flown anything, who this is their first Scarab. It might be their very first Paris board. Big tip, important tip. Don't try and make everything work for the first few flights. Go 10 flights before you even connect the video leads to the Paris board. Don't connect the data wire from the Andromeda to the Paris board until you've flown the Paris and it is perfect and it is tuned. This is a lovely accessory. It does some really nice things, but you know what? You don't need it for a maiden. And a big fault I'm seeing with guys out there is they are trying to make everything work on their first flight. Guys who have never even charged a LiPo before are trying to worry about the on-screen display on the FPV for their very first hover of the aircraft. That's the last thing you want to worry about. The only thing you want to do on your first flight of one of these, on your hand maiden, for the actual maiden of the aircraft, you get it into a stable hover. The second flight is making sure it's stable in a stable hover and flying properly. The 20th flight, you worry about the on-screen display. The 30th flight, you worry about the RGB ring and the oLED on the new V3 Andromeda. These things, don't overload yourself on your early flights. Okay, so anyway, now how do we actually fit this? Now the first thing I do with the Andromeda, the V3, is I solder in an additional lead on my Andromedas. Okay, it's this yellow wire here with a connector on it, and I solder it into the terminal here that is marked plus 16 volts. Why? Very simple. Okay, we've got our two looms here. One is power in, coming off your LiPo connector. The other is power back out for your video transmitter. It actually says FPV 12 volts here on the board. Okay, so I'm not going to show you how to plug those in. It's fairly self-explanatory. So I've got power coming in, 16 volts. So that is 16 volts from my LiPo. By soldering onto this 16 volt terminal with this little lead, I can very easily plug this little lead into, it's hard to see, the voltage sense pin for the built-in on-screen display. So by connecting that connector there, you won't be able to see it because of the angle, sorry. By connecting that wire in there to that center pin, I've now got my battery voltage working on my on-screen display. And that's why I soldered that extra wiring. Okay? For your first flight, you shouldn't be worried about that. The only connection from the Andromeda to the Paris for your first flight you really need to worry about is the ground connection for the LED trigger, which goes just there on the Paris board. Okay? That is now ready for a maiden. That is ready to go fly. My orientation part of my Andromeda will work. The flashy lights to tell me it's arming and stuff works perfectly. That's all I need to do for the first flight. Right? So once I've got everything else dealt with, and I want to make the rest of the features of the Andromeda work, and the on-screen display, I can plug in my power lead, and then I can plug in the data loom from the V3 Andromeda to the Andromeda port on the Paris. Very important thing. There are two connectors on the back of the Andromeda here. One is marked I2C, it's at the back of the Andromeda, it's closest on the end that's closest to this connector for the oLED. The other is marked FTDI. The FTDI port is used to upgrade the software on the oLED, which is preloaded, pre-done, pre-tested. You should never actually have to use that FTDI connector, ever. But if you accidentally plug this loom into this connector and into here, you'll instantly blow this up. It will then never ever work. It will be dead, it will be DOA, and it will not be covered under warranty. So never ever 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 plug this loom into the FTDI connector, which is towards the front where the logo is of the Andromeda V3. This loom should only ever be plugged into the rear connector, and once everything else is working, that then gets plugged into the Andromeda connector on the Paris board. Okay, and that'll make my pretty lights work. While I'm at it, I'm going to take my voltage sense wire and connect it to the voltage input for the IOSD, and then my Andromeda, I'll just put a screw in just to hold it in place for now, sits happily on top of my 4 posts. And that's my V3 Andromeda all set up and working, all ready to go. Okay, I'm going to have to actually take this outside and do some footage outside to show you the functions of it. There are other videos on the net to show you the functionality of the RGB ring. So I will just grab a LiPo and power this up just to show you how it actually all lights up. Okay, and it takes a few seconds for it all to boot up, and you can see there the oLED is booted up, and now my RGB ring is starting up, and it's going to sit there doing its little light show until there's a GPS lock or a mag lock. It's not going to work sitting here on the bench. Alright, but the LEDs are powered up. They're all lit up a really nice blue with the red going around, and I can see my oLED. Now, if there are any stray lines or stray characters coming up on the oLED, you've got I2C errors. And not many things can cause I2C errors, but what it will be is something like the mag wire is too close to the GPS wire. But you know that's not the cause because you've been flying this successfully without the Andromeda lead plugged in. So if you plug the Andromeda in, data lead in, and then you get I2C errors, okay, only a few things can cause that. Number one is there's something wrong with the wiring loom itself, okay, or you don't have the code to run the LED or the I2C, sorry, the LEDs or the oLED. You don't have that code loaded into your Paris board to run them. If you connect a device you don't have code for, it will generate I2C errors. The other possibility, of course, is that the loom is touching something between the two and causing those I2C errors. So as soon as you see this flashing, if you've got I2C errors, just little lines or squigglies on the oLED, unplug it and work out what the cause of those I2C errors is. If it's not code, it's going to be a wiring issue between the two devices. And given there's not a lot of lead run, it's pretty hard to see that happening too often. But there you go. So that's how that mounts up. A little bit later I'll do a video on the functionality of the RGB ring itself. There's already videos on how the oLED works on the Multi-rotor website product page for the oLED. And the RGB, there is a brief video on what the LEDs are indicating, but I'll come back and do one of those anyway. I'm going to do some outdoor flying type videos very soon, and I'll include one on the RGB ring as part of that. So that's my Andromeda V3 working on my Paris V5r3 ready to go flying. I'll see you guys online.